In a shocking new interview, it's just been leaked that China is going to buy 1 million Bitcoin. This information comes from the Pantera CEO and mediator. At the same time, we're getting reports that France now wants to accumulate 2% of the Bitcoin network. That's around 400,000 Bitcoin. New draft laws have been introduced here. Michael Saylor has once again published his personal Bitcoin holdings and says he hasn't sold any here. Guys, hollow, don't sell. Tomorrow we have the upcoming Fed meeting. We'll take a look at how likely interest rate cuts are now and what that means for the market. And much more. The Bitcoin price is still hovering around 115,000 US dollars. It shot up briefly to almost 116,000, then was immediately sold off again. Let's dive into all of it. But first, let's take a quick second. It's really important that you smash the like button down below for higher Bitcoin prices and new all-time highs. As a thank you, I'll show you this beautiful flower. You can see it here too. The Bitcoin price shot up to 116,000 US dollars, but then it was immediately sold off again. Right now, we have a 100% probability that interest rates will be cut tomorrow. There's a 98% chance we'll see a 25 basis point cut, and a 2% chance we'll see a 50 basis point cut. It'll also be interesting to see what Jerome Powell says after this meeting. That means there will be a Q&A afterwards. As usual, there will probably be a question about Bitcoin again, though you never know. It'll be really interesting to see what happens next. Here we also see Donald Trump putting pressure on Jerome Powell again. He says here that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell will step down in a few months. So, he's already assuming, or rather, we know, that Powell will step down. Donald Trump would probably be fine with him stepping down even a bit earlier than his original term. So, I think that's in May or something like that. And a lot of people assume that if that happens, if he steps down, the markets could shoot up even more dramatically. So it's not just the Bitcoin market, but markets in general, because everything would just be flooded with money. There would be no stopping it then. Donald Trump wants to lower interest rates to 1% or even lower. Michael Saylor also says here, you do not sell your Bitcoin. He still has all his Bitcoin holdings. 17,732 Bitcoin, which he bought for $9,882 each. And it's his private, personal stash. He confirmed it again here, because a lot of people asked, okay, do you still have your Bitcoin? He says, of course, he hasn't sold his Bitcoin at any point, and that's pretty wild. He's already made a 10-bagger here, more than 10 times his initial investment. And it's also crazy to see how he had such strong conviction right from the start. And just these Bitcoin purchases alone already make him an absolute legend. Now, what comes next with strategy on top is even more intense. He added another 700,000. Michael Saylor also said that he might even take his Bitcoin to the grave with him. So, what's also interesting here, despite all this bullishness, British Hodl points out that we still have a huge CME gap here, specifically a CME gap at $12,300. Normally, something like this always has to be filled, and as we can see here, there's a 90% hit rate. And he says, yes, there are two ways to close this CME gap. Either we see a massive bull run that shoots Bitcoin up to $340,000, and then we see a 67% drop, which would close the CME gap again. Or we could see some small pullbacks right away, and these pullbacks would then lead to the CME gap being closed. I mean, I have to tell you, somehow the CME gap never really makes sense to me, but the statistics just keep showing that it actually does make sense. So, I just can't wrap my head around it, just because you don't trade Bitcoin 24/7. And then somehow here, from Friday to Sunday, some exchanges are closed here, not trading, and then these gaps that form end up getting filled again. Somehow, I just can't logically understand it, but statistically it just makes sense that these gaps often get filled. That's why there are these two options here. Feel free to write down below what you think is realistic. And then here, a really interesting story. France introduces a bill to purchase 420,000 Bitcoin for its national reserves. Here, that's 2% of the Bitcoin supply. It also says that the whole thing is being brought before the National Assembly. It's the first time such a comprehensive text on this topic has been published in France. Here, I'm presenting the proposals, which are divided into three main areas. There are various stories here that you can check out. So, the creation of a public administrative unit that is supposed to accumulate a reserve of 2% of the total Bitcoin supply over a period of 7 to 8 years. It will also be very, very interesting to see how quickly the price of Bitcoin rises. If the price of Bitcoin rises very, very quickly, then this goal here might not be achieved. A kind of national digital gold to diversify the foreign currency reserves. The financing would work as follows. Public mining would be generated here from surplus nuclear and hydropower, with corresponding taxation of the miners here. Systematic retention of bitcoins confiscated in the course of legal proceedings, so in addition, the seizures. Allocation of a quarter of the savings bond. Book A and the LDDS collected contributions for the daily purchase of Bitcoin on the secondary market. So, if I understood it correctly, especially here, seizures and Bitcoin mining, which are supposed to contribute here to the strategic Bitcoin reserve. But we also have to be very clear about this. Due to the low weight of the UDR in the plenary, with only 16 deputies here, this bill has hardly any chance with the president of being confirmed by the Assembly's Presidium. This text contains several proposals that have been advocated by the industry for many years, as well as some new ones. Even though the chances of success for this bill are slim, it does show the ambition of the UDR group to present itself as the party best able to defend the interests of the French crypto ecosystem. So, that's always the thing. You can draft endless bills, but if there's no chance of getting them passed, what's the point? And we also know that France is a very, very socialist country. They're facing major problems. A euro crisis is looming, they've been downgraded. And it's nice, we also have a big treasury company here in France with capital D. And of course, they also said and shared, hey, awesome, this is all happening here now, following in the footsteps of capital B, and now France is becoming a big player here. But honestly, it's just unrealistic. These are just socialists who are running the show here. And so, freedom money is very, very difficult here. It's hard to push that concept into the mindset of socialists here. What I actually find much more realistic here is what the Pantera CEO and Mega are saying. Namely, that China is going to buy 1 million Bitcoin. Apparently, he has insider information or already knows something that other people don't. Very, very interesting what exactly he says here about nation-state adoption.
Wall Street driven. This is It's pretty obvious that the countries that are adversaries of the U.S. will ultimately buy Bitcoin and potentially other coins, but I would say at least start with Bitcoin. And so I think there's going to be an arms race, right? And there'll be like Dr. Strangelove's strategic mineshaft gap, right? Like it's going to be a real race. And as you know, there's only
Donald Trump also keeps saying, hey, we have to be ahead of China here.
Race. And as you know, there's only 21 million. And if a bunch of people all want to buy 1 million each, it's not enough to go around, right? And there again, that's why I'm so bullish, because there's just not enough Bitcoins to satisfy
There will be a race, the Bitcoin race. I need to rewind a bit here because I went too far ahead.
countries' desires. I think the U.S. has 200,000 Bitcoins just, from confiscations, kind of a random.
And China has roughly the same, I think.
Yeah, and China has roughly the same. No problem seeing them wanting to buy 1 million Bitcoins. It's still tiny compared to their balance sheets, budgets, all that stuff. And so if you have 2, 3, 4, like say the GC wants to buy 1 million, China wants to buy 1 million, maybe Russia wants to buy some, US, like it's going to squeeze up like a watermelon seed.
He said he doesn't see a problem here. That China will buy 1 million Bitcoins. So either he has insider information, or it's just what he's interpreting into this. They're talking here about how China and the US currently have relatively similar Bitcoin holdings, at least the official holdings. Although we also have to say, we don't know exactly how many Bitcoins the US actually has. I mean, there are the latest numbers, something like 300,000, but I think they're just missing a few audits of old holdings that aren't 100% confirmed. There have been new confiscations recently. In China, it's also roughly 200,000. But there are different opinions about that too. Some say it's more, some say it's less, some say they're secretly mining Bitcoin and actually have way more Bitcoin. But that's always the thing. It's always just like that. Rough ballpark figures. It's never anything really exact, especially when you don't know how much Bitcoin they might still secretly have. Compared to their balance sheets, budgets, all that stuff. So if you have 2, 3, 4, let's say the GC wants to buy 1 million, China wants to buy 1 million, maybe Russia wants to buy some, the US, it's going to squeeze up like a watermelon seed. So, just like a watermelon seed, the whole thing is going to explode. He's also talking about how, as I mentioned, Russia is possibly in the process of accumulating massive amounts of Bitcoin. Several countries are absolutely involved in this. Many G20 nations, he even says here, right here. Billionaire and Pantera Capital CEO just revealed that the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, are also heavily involved in Bitcoin mining. So, of course, they're not buying it on the open market, they're mining Bitcoin themselves. And in my opinion, that's always the reason why the hash rate keeps going up, even though the Bitcoin price goes through its ups and downs. It has its periods. That means sometimes it goes up, sometimes it drops a bit again, a small correction. But the hash rate, even during bear markets, has only continued to rise the whole time. Probably exactly for this reason, because nation-states are massively accumulating Bitcoin here. They know that you need Bitcoin here. They know that you should be betting on Bitcoin here. And above all, they want to build up their Bitcoin holdings here anonymously and privately, without anyone else finding out. And that's why you have to do Bitcoin mining here. And that's why, in some cases, they're even doing negative mining here. Basically, you end up paying more for the Bitcoin than you would have to pay on the public market, because not every country always has 100% cheap electricity. I mean, a lot of countries, they still somehow get it from surpluses or something like that. But then, in some cases, you can even accept paying a bit more here, because maybe you end up paying 10% extra. But that really doesn't matter if, in 10 years, the price of Bitcoin has increased tenfold or 100-fold. And for that, you just don't kick off the global nation-state race that would trigger FOMO here. And now I've been sent something really, really interesting. It's about gold, and a lot of people still think the gold standard is going to come back. Please, check out this video and then think again about whether the gold standard is really going to make a comeback.
Everything is run by cartels and you just pay with gold. This is my gold, and now I want to use it to get myself a coffee. All right, 1 cappuccino here and so on. Yeah, sorry. Okay, 7,000. I hope my gold is enough. Very good, very good. Yeah. Who did it with the small one? Me. That's basically the hotel.
Laundry. Which one?
At home. Thanks. That's how much I paid. 0.7 euros. And this gold is all that's left now. This way I can somehow buy lunch here. Or do my laundry. Because I really have to do something again. I think it's very important. What I still find so crazy is that people just use banknotes to shit on because they're worth so little. This country really is crazy. Hard work with the gold bird has paid off. There's delicious coffee and a tasty sandwich.
So I'd say it's much easier and much better with Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is superior. That's why the comparison between Bitcoin and gold is always very, very difficult, because Bitcoin is just far superior to gold here. If you want to buy Bitcoin now, I'll put a link for you below, 21 Bitcoin. There you can easily make sure how we buy Bitcoin. Use the code BitcoinUND here to save up to 20% on the fee and save when buying Bitcoin. And I'll see you. Peace out.